Hey, Avenue Church. Hey, I want to thank you for tuning in this week on just kind of digging deeper on our discipleship journey. We talked about on Sunday or Thursday, depending on when you came to church, uh, Nehemiah kind of responding and discerning the call of God in his life. And I thought, for this week, I wanted to share a little bit more about my story, about my journey in trying to discern God's call in my own life. And I know that a lot of pastors will talk about their call to ministry, and it's set apart as something very different or unique than what most Christians experience. And I do agree that there is a certain calling to function as an elder or a pastor that is unique in a certain sense. But there's a lot of things I believe that are part of my story that are common in the call of every Christian, that God calls to be active and serve and be a part of the good news of Jesus that goes out to the whole world. So I hope to encourage you with those pieces. So I'll just kind of start so this doesn't get too long. But as a kid, I was raised in church. My dad was a deacon. My mom, church secretary. I mean, I was literally the kid that was there every time the doors were open, and so had a great upbringing. Came to trust in Jesus personally when I was a small child here at what's now the Avenue Church, was Temple Baptist prior. And just grew up knowing the stories, living more or less what people would call a pretty good life. Many times that was a surface level obedience to just maintain an image or to avoid trouble. Um, but God didn't really start to wrestle with my heart until I was a teenager, and especially kind of 14, 15, 16 years old especially. And I felt like God was calling me and wanted me to serve him in ministry, like as a pastor. And I didn't pursue that. I actually didn't want that. I wanted to make a lot of money. I mean, there's no other way to say it. I was like really materialistic in the sense that I wanted to have a job or a career where I could make a lot of money. And that was something I wanted. And I had plans to do just that. And so, it really wasn't until after high school. I was still kind of wrestling with that. I went to college locally at the community college here in Pueblo, and really God had just still kept on me about this. You're not going to be an electrical engineer. That's what I thought I wanted to do. Thought maybe I wanted to do something in the realm of audio or things like that. So it was just it was something that God eventually enabled me to put my trust in him. And I say that because I I had this weird thought that if I gave God control of my life, I'd be miserable. Like I called it Amazon jungle syndrome. I just knew if I told God, okay, God, I'll do whatever it is that you want me to do. I just knew that I was going to be miserable in some mosquito laden rainforest somewhere and like dying of malaria. I just had that in my mind. Like that's what I was signing on for. If I gave my life truly over to God and really just said, okay, God, whatever you call me to do, that's what I'll do. Um, so I struggle with that. It really is that year out of high school, and I finally just committed to say, okay, I'm gonna go to Bible college and I'm gonna pursue this, and I'm just gonna let you have it. All right. So I want to just dive into some principles that I think are applied across the board, no matter. I don't believe God calls everyone to be in full-time vocational ministry. Actually, very few. And the way our world's going, even I don't know how many of those type roles are going to be accessible. I think a lot of people who serve, well, everyone who is a Christian is called to serve and is called to the ministry in one way or another. Um, and so let me talk about the principles that I look back on my life and I see as broadly applicable. And so, number one, I think, is that, you know, what God wants to do in you is just as important as anything that He wants to do through you. And I know that when we talk about calling and we study Nehemiah, and yeah, God calls Nehemiah to build a wall, right? So that's what he did through Nehemiah. But what God did in Nehemiah was just as important. And I believe that God has called me to be a pastor and to serve the church and to serve him in that capacity. But God is just as concerned about what's happening in me as he is what's happening through me. And I feel like one of the things that as I've looked back, in my submission to what I believe to be the call of God in my life was really about giving up idols. Like I mentioned, I had an idolatry of materialism or of pride that I was going to make myself something. I was going to make something of my life, and that's what that identity was going to be an idol for me. It was an idol for me, and I've recognized that was something I had to let go of. Not just the financial gain that maybe would have come through a different career, but just the pride that would come through worldly success. So again, I look back and say, okay, that's just as important as anything that God wants to do through me is what he wants to do in me. So that's an application for all of us, right? And then secondly, it's about our faith. It's about our trust. And I mentioned, Amazon jungle, right? I didn't have the faith in God that he would take care of me. I didn't have the trust that he could actually guide my life into a way that would bring me life abundant. And it's really been cool because even as like a youth pastor in my first full-time position, I got to do a lot of things, building sound systems and building speakers for our youth room and different things like that actually kind of check the box of some of the like electrical audio engineering type desires that I had that I thought I wanted to make a career out of. And God just kind of said, hey, you know what? I'll let you build giant subwoofer enclosures as part of ministry. Like, how cool is that? I thought it was pretty awesome. So, and then it, thirdly, so it takes faith to step out. And then thirdly, it connects the dots. It connects the dots of how God's wired you, of the different experiences that he's allowed you to go through, the different passions and good desires that he's placed in your heart. It just starts to connect the dots when we live within the calling that God has given us. And that's why it's so unique and it's individual. And things that connect the dots for me in my life, that's like, oh, I love to do that. I love when I get to see this happen, right? And then when I'm able to stand back and say, okay, God's working these things out. God has allowed me to serve in ways that take advantage of the experiences that I've had that have allowed maybe even trials that I've gone through to be a blessing and a benefit for others and going forward. So yeah, it connects the dots, and then fourthly, lastly, it's confirmed through experience. Is that as we live within our call, it works, right? So it doesn't mean that everything's easy, and it doesn't mean that everything is wildly successful that we attempt or do. But if we're living within our calling, or if we think we're living within our calling and we experience nothing but frustration and the people around us aren't confirming that they see God using us to bring about, His will, and our, our lives are glorifying God through this thing that we do, or how we are believing what we're in our calling. Because sometimes, again, we can allow what we want to do to drive the boat, instead of really submitting and saying, God, how do you want me to live? How do you want me to serve? How do you want to use my life? So 4 principles, again, not comprehensive. There's a lot more, I believe, that goes into discerning your calling, and it's really a lifelong process. And what God calls you to do in this season of your life may be a little different than how He leads you and directs you in the next season. So it's dynamic as we follow God, as we're in relationship with God, and we try to submit our lives to how He's calling us to live and to be and to work. So anyways, I hope that that's an encouragement, and I hope that in some way, at least one of those points can help you as you ask yourself the question, what's my calling in life? How has God uniquely positioned and created me to use my life to make a difference? And I pray that you're asking yourself those questions, and I believe that God's going to help you discern answers. So thanks for listening. If you're still watching, man, God bless you, and we will see you later. Glad to be on the journey with you.